Okay, so we're all set to go.
Okay, I'll go ahead and get us started. Good evening. My name is George Cardona. I'm the interim city attorney. I want to thank everybody for being here as part of this listening session. As I think all of you know, the city of Santa Monica has retained OIR Group to prepare an independent after-action report and evaluation regarding the events leading to, during, and following May 31st, 2020. As part of its work, OIR Group wants to hear from community members who were affected by these events. This is the first of what will be at least 2 listening sessions conducted by OIR Group to hear your comments live. I also want to remind everybody that if after this listening session you have additional information that you want OIR Group to consider, you can email that information to OIR Group at the email that was included when you registered. I want to now introduce Michael Giannacco, principal and founding member of OIR Group. Mike Giannacco served from 2001 to 2014 as the chief attorney of Los Angeles County's Office of Independent Review, which was tasked with oversight of the Sheriff's Department. He graduated from Dartmouth College and Stanford Law School, and before joining the Office of Independent Review, he was the chief of the Civil Rights Section at the United States Attorney's Office for the Central District of California. He also served for 10 years as a trial attorney with the Civil Rights Division at the Justice Department of Washington, first with the voting section and then with the civil criminal section. While working for DOJ and the United States Attorney's Office, he supervised and conducted federal grand jury investigations and civil rights prosecutions of police misconduct, most of them involving excessive force and in-custody deaths. In addition, he conducted hate crime prosecutions, including the prosecution of Buford Furrow, a white supremacist who killed a Filipino-American postal carrier here in Los Angeles. In conducting law enforcement oversight, Mr. Giannacco has performed monitoring tasks, audits, and reviews for a federal judge, special masters, and other government entities. He's also a recognized expert in law enforcement reform and accountability systems. Under his leadership, OIR Group has worked with a number of California cities that have been dealing with officer-involved shootings and other critical incidents. He submitted testimony to the President's 21st Century Task Force on Policing, and he was also honored in 2011 by the National Association for the Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement as a recipient of its highest recognition for outstanding contributions. So with that, I will turn it over to Mike and the OIR Group to conduct this listening session.
Thank you, George. It's great to be with you all this evening, and thank you for taking your time to participate in this listening session. We really appreciate it. As Mr. Cardone indicated, I'm with OIR Group, and the group is a team of folks that primarily engage in oversight and independent reviews of critical incidents and police activity, such as the project for which you all are all here this evening. In fact, this is our 4th project relating to analysis, assessment, of police response to protest activity and related activity in various jurisdictions. We have a project in Iowa City, Iowa, of a similar sort, one in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and are helping to conduct an internal investigation into the police response in the city of Santa Rosa up in Northern California. So with that, I wanted to introduce my colleagues who will be with us this evening as well. We have Julie Rulin and Teresa Magula. If Teresa and Julie, you want to say hi and kick us off, that would be great.
I will just say hello for now and let Teresa start us off with some of the features that you're going to need to know about today and some of the ground rules for this discussion.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are new to Blue Jeans, as some of you also may be new to Blue Jeans, and I wanted to review with you quickly before we begin some of the features that we will be using this evening. On your presenters panel, you will see a right-hand toolbar. We're going to ask that you please mute your audio, if you are not speaking, so that we don't receive feedback and such or background noise. We would like to call on people and recognize you to speak by using the event chat function. So the event chat is an icon. It looks like a large word bubble on the right panel. And if you would please, if you wish to speak, go ahead and type us an event chat letting us know that you would like to be recognized to speak this evening. And we will do our best to call on everybody who would like to make a comment this evening so that we can hear all of the different perspectives. If you have any technical issues, such as people who are perhaps not able to hear, people whose volume is not functioning, we're going to ask that you use the moderator chat. That's the icon that looks like a person with a word bubble. That moderator chat will connect you to our tech support in the city, Corey, who is most phenomenal and will help you best she can to make sure that you can access the session. We're also going to use polls this evening. The poll function is the icon that looks like a bar chart over on the right. And when we go live with a new poll, that will have a blue dot over it. That blue dot will, red dot, and the red dot will indicate that the poll is live and ready for you to participate. We're going to ask that you please do quickly participate in our polls so that we can gauge who's on the call with us and your perspective. And when you're completed with the poll, you can return to the chat function if you'd like to follow the event chat and what's happening in that box. Julie, could I have you scroll to our meeting agreements on our PowerPoint, please? Thank you. So as Mike mentioned, we are currently doing a number of similar projects throughout the United States and conducting a number of listening sessions. We have found that it is very productive and effective to start the meeting with some agreements that all of us will adhere to as we are participating on this listening session. I'm going to read those and make sure that everyone is clear on what this session is about. We'd like people to share this time with other community members. So at the moment, we have about 35 of you on the call. We'd like to hear everyone's perspective. We will allow others to offer ideas and opinions. There may be some folks who think quite differently than you, and we're going to just allow the space to listen and hear those various perspectives. Similarly, we will listen respectfully. We will ask that you please hold your comments until we have recognized you as a speaker, at which point we'd like you to unmute yourself and make your comment. And there may be the choice to not speak at all this evening. Also, if you're feeling uncomfortable, with that stated, I think that we're going to jump into some polls, Julie, if that's right. And we're going to go ahead and kick off the conversation with a poll asking about who's on the call and your affiliation here in Santa Monica. So I'll turn it back over to my colleague, Julie, to start running some of these polls.
Thank you, Teresa. And yeah, I know we've already got people who've let us know that they're ready to speak, so I don't want to take too much more time, but if we can quickly get through these polls. The first one is coming up, and it is basically just to say, what's your connection to Santa Monica? So we have a sense of that, and I think if the poll's working right, we should all get to see as results come in, and so everyone else on the call can have a sense too of who's here and what brings you here. If you don't see all of the, one thing you might have to do is scroll down to see all of the options. Give just another 10 or 15 seconds on that one. These polls are, they don't record in any way where we can tag a particular response to a particular person. So if you have a concern about confidentiality, you need not worry about that. And I'm going to end this poll and move on to the next one. And it looks like we've just got the majority of folks who are residents of Santa Monica. So the next poll is just quickly, why did you join us tonight? And you know, you may have more than one thing to select here, but just kind of click on the one that strikes you as most the best reason. All right, I'm going to end this in just a couple seconds. Jump to the next one. If you could just quickly tell us what your role was on May 31st. All right, another few seconds on this one. Thank you to everyone who's participating in this. This is sort of helpful groundwork for us.
It is. It does help us to understand who the different parties were here. So thanks for doing it.
Here's the next one. How do you rate the police response on May 31st? Got a lot of votes in on this one. I'm going to give it just another couple seconds. And one final poll question. What aspect of the May 31st events was most concerning? And again, there might be more than one of these that concern you, but which one is the thing that seems most egregious or most concerning? And we're hoping that these can sort of serve as a framework to get us started on the conversation or the listening session here. As you will have a chance to elaborate on your responses to any of these poll questions. So I can leave this one open for another few seconds. But Teresa, if you want to queue up, I know we've got a list already of people who want to speak. And so, as Mike said at the outset, this part of the process is for us to hear from you, to hear what your perspectives are. And so, enough from us, and we would like to just hear what you all have to say. So, Teresa, who's up first?
Yeah, so I'm going to say the first three names on our list so that you can prepare yourself if you're up next. The first person to speak will be Craig Miller. When Craig is complete, I will acknowledge Sadie to speak. And then we have Andrew Weiser, excuse me if I've mispronounced that, will be our third speaker this evening. So Craig, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute your audio, and we will listen to what you have to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I want to begin by saying, say his name, George Floyd. Say their names. I can't. There's too many. But Black Lives Matter. Good evening. Thank you for your service to our city. This is a weighty matter, and I appreciate your efforts to date and that of the other dial-in participants. My name is Craig Miller. I am a Santa Monican for democracy, which is more complicated than it may sound. I'm a 38-year resident of the Ocean Park neighborhood of Santa Monica, and I'm the parent of 4 Latinx adult children, 3 of whom are graduates of Samo High. Go Samo. I want to thank Councilwoman Sue Hemmelrich for her leadership in calling for this independent investigation. I am an eyewitness to the horrific events of 5/31. I want you to know that I am a recent cancer survivor whose immune system has not fully recovered from treatment. So the decision to leave my 4th Street condo and go out on the afternoon of May 31st, well, it was the most adventurous thing I had done in 3 months, and about the only outdoor activity, walking my dog. It was a decision that I really gave a lot of thought to. It was a difficult call to make about personal health, community health, and our obligations to one another. But as I sat with it on Saturday without leaving my home, and then watched Sunday start to slip by, the obvious and only thing to do for me became apparent. I needed to be in the street, and I needed to make noise on behalf of what is occurring. One of my kids, Bardo Lopez, was with me and is also an eyewitness. We are both available to offer further eyewitness accounts. I'm not going to take much time this evening on the eyewitness aspects of this, but I'm available to be interviewed, as is Bardo Lopez. I will quickly say this from an eyewitness standpoint. I was only out for an hour, but it happened to be the key hour, from 3 to 4 in the afternoon. And the route from where I live to where I headed, which was in the direction of the pier, happened to be a very, very scenic route. So just by happenstance, I was able to see quite a lot. With regards to what I witnessed in Ocean Avenue, I want to quickly just express a few eyewitness, what to me are facts, or as honestly and best as I can perceive them. There were only about 200 people in the street and on the sidewalks of Ocean Avenue, south of the pier. You know, my recollection of it was that the space was much larger. But when I went back to visit, I realized it was actually a fairly small space, which really couldn't have held much more than 200 people. I saw no rocks thrown, no bottles thrown, none. That does not mean no rocks or bottles were thrown, but I'm honestly reporting to you, I saw none. And I would also tell you that upon arriving at Ocean Avenue, it was at 3 o'clock. It was unclear to me as to whether the police had, quote unquote, given the protesters the street, so to speak, as had occurred in a number of places in recent days, or not. It was unclear, but there was no call for people to leave the street. There was, to my ears, and again, I can't swear this is the case because it's an open space and it was a lot of commotion, but I heard no warning from the police officers. I heard no order to disperse, no indication that this was an illegal assembly. But I was present to see, at not too far of a distance, the surreal scene of police officers officers doing what sure looked like loading their weapons with what sure looked like tear gas canisters, and then they were fired in our direction. And I will tell you that it was upon the firing of that crowd, that was the first moment.
Oh,
Craig, I think we may have lost our connection with you. If you do join back in, we will acknowledge you to... Oh, there he is. Craig, are you with us? While Craig is figuring out what might be technical issues, Craig, are you with us?
This is Craig. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. It seems like you're coming in and out.
Okay, so sorry about that. Just south of the location of this peaceful, if spirited, just south. On here.
So it keeps on showing involved.
Craig, I'm going to go ahead and move on to Sadie. We seem to be having some technical issues with your connection. Sadie, if you're available, go ahead and unmute your audio for us and share your thoughts tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. May 31st, 2020, a day that will be burned in my memory forever. A day that has truly changed all of our lives in Santa Monica. I got home from my second job at 12:15 p.m. that day. I noticed high school age kids parked in front of my building near 7th and Broadway. In their trunks, they had huge duffel bags ready to go. Since I knew about the looting from days previous to this, I knew what was happening. I called 911 right away, only to be met with, "We can't help you." I was shocked to the core. We had been abandoned. Didn't the police need information to protect our city? So for the next hour or two, I watched as more and more high school and early college kids park and unload bags from their cars, leave their cars in front of our buildings, and walk to the promenade. As the violent and horrific day unfolded, I watched as our city was destroyed. I had to listen and sit back wondering if my building was next. Was I going to be locked in? And as they set fire to our building, where would I go and what would I do? I have no family and nowhere else to go. The residents and business owners have been abandoned by the very people we pay to protect us and keep us safe and make sure things like this don't happen. I watched as my Vons was tagged, looted, and destroyed. Criminals smiling and laughing as we watched in horror from our building. This was fun for them and you could see it. Around 4 p.m. I could hear screaming. The looters were yelling at the apartments on my street. They were screaming, "You guys are next. No one is safe and we will take what's ours. We are owed 40 acres and a mule and you will give this to us." To flee police, these looters were in my building, hiding and running away. They stole bikes from our residents, children's toys out of the garage downstairs. Scared, the children and adults had to hide, and the PTSD we will now live with will never go away. It will only get worse with time. To say that we were truly traumatized is an understatement. The very city I have worked in for 70 hours a week with 2 jobs just so I can make rent at a low-income apartment building has turned their back on me. 2 jobs and being in school. Santa Monica felt like home the second I moved here. It was my dream since I was 4 years old. Now that's all that's left for me here are violent memories and constant reminders of that day. A lot of residents aren't sleeping and are scared with even a car horn. I have personally made one of the hardest decisions of my life and deciding to move away. I can't live in a city that would turn its back on its residents and small business owners. I wanted to raise my family here and grow old. A city that had let the homeless take over and leave residents in absolute filth. The people who attacked Santa Monica on May 31st are not opportunists or or whatever the media wants to call them. They are people who did this with intent. They are criminals who took advantage of a city that knew wouldn't hold them accountable. And in the days after, we haven't received an apology. The so-called leaders never showed up to assist the site owners, business owners, and residents. Nothing provided to the residents for coping with what we had gone through. No talk of plans on how the city would have done it differently or provide support for those affected by this. We were abandoned that day, and we continue to walk alone. These are the people who know right from wrong, but chose to incite violence and chaos. Not only did they get merchandise from the stores, but they stole any piece that we had here. This beautiful city is destroyed. The residents emailed and called for days before, and the city knew what was ahead. The people who paid the ultimate price were our residents and shop owners who will now live with this horrific day, children scarred, and their businesses destroyed. Thank you so much for having me speak.
Beatty, thank you for that very vulnerable and authentic share. I could hear how this has impacted your day-to-day now, and I really do appreciate your being vulnerable and authentic in that very powerful statement you made. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to move to Andrew Waltzer. Excuse me, I got your name wrong earlier. Andrew, if you are available, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me? My microphone isn't great.
Yeah, there's a lot of background noise there, Andrew, but we'll do the best we can.
It's my microphone. It's don't buy a Dell computer. In any case, I live on Franklin and Wilshire, and I had heard from a neighbor that somebody was breaking into the CVS pharmacy at around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It's at 3202 Wilshire Boulevard. And so I walked up to the corner of Franklin and Wilshire, and I saw the Santa Monica Police Department on Franklin Street, just south of Wilshire. There were about 10 police people, and they deployed in two columns, in a column side by side, and then a group went down into the garage down below CVS Pharmacy, and another group went behind. But the people that broke into CVS Pharmacy had long gone, and so this group of at least 10 police officers were there, and there was nobody around. There was no movers around or anything. So there was this pretty significant deployment of police officers that stood around for at least a good half an hour between 5 and 6 p.m. on that day, on that Sunday. And I wanted to tell you this because it didn't seem like efficient use of police power. So I don't know if this was logged as part of the police records or not, because I'm here to make sure that you guys acknowledge are able to hear what happened, just in case it didn't get logged, because it was a failure of the use of police power. Later that night, at about 8 or 9, I saw the looters breaking into the Big 5 of the lock. They were banging down on the lock, and I tried to call 911, no lock, and so I called the police department directly, and I said, the looters are breaking the lock on Big 5, and they said, yes, we know. And that was the end of that conversation. And I don't know if that was recorded, but I'm hoping that we will put that in the record as well. So that's all I have to say. I just want to make sure there's a record of this, what happened, what I saw. I'm done.
All right. Thank you, Andrew, for sharing that information.
Okay, our next speaker on the queue just identified as the letter M. So M, if you are available. Coming up after are Mike Feinstein and Homa M. So both of you please prepare to speak Once we have heard from M, please go ahead and unmute yourself and share your comments. M, are you available to speak? Okay, we will come back to you. Mike Feinstein, if you're on the line, please unmute yourself.
Yes, hi. Mike Feinstein. I'm a 35-year resident and a former elected official in the city. I have a short comment, and that is, I was aware, not from sources in Santa Monica, but from sources outside of Santa Monica, that there were other interests competing for the attention of the National Guard, and that they came later than we would have preferred, in part because of that tug of war. And I see that as making a bad situation worse, and had they been able to come earlier, they may have been able to intervene. And I think that lack of intervention also impacted our city council elections in a not insignificant way. So the implications were bad both on May 31st and for the future. And what I'm wondering is, when the city report comes out, given the sensitive nature of other jurisdictions competing with us for the attention of the National Guard, whether the residents are going to know about that and understand the significance of that. And then number two, whether there are going to be any policy suggestions about how to avoid cities competing over the National Guard and having it become a zero-sum game with losers like we were on May 31st. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feinstein. That's an important element. The whole question of mutual aid and certainly the events in late May, early June impacted many communities in Southern California. And the question of deployment of resources, including resources outside the city, is something that we are going to encompass into our review. So, but thank you for your insight there, and there will be follow-up. And this report is intended to be an unvarnished report of what happened. In our view, that's the only way it can be in order for us to be better prepared as a community, as in your community, for similar events in the future.
All right. If you have resolved your microphone issues, please go ahead and unmute and come back on for us. It doesn't seem like that has been resolved yet. I'm going to go ahead and move to Homa M. Homa, if you are available, please go ahead and unmute yourself. We'd love to hear your comments.
Hi, this is Homa. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Hi, so thank you so much for this process and this opportunity to contribute our thoughts. I want to talk about the curfew that was imposed on the city on May 30th, the night before the protests. I was very upset about the curtailment of our civil liberties, and so I called the police department to complain and was told by the dispatcher that they had received threats or for whatever reason we needed to be in curfew. I was extremely upset to see the following day the inaction, the way the police treated protesters, the way it seemed like they were focusing on the protesters to the exclusion of the looting that was happening nearby. And in subsequent reports from the city, the impression I got was that the police claimed to not know that the looting was going to happen. They were not prepared for the unrest. They had no intel that anything bad was going to happen, in which case it raises the issue of why were we locked down in curfew the night before. I think that the way that the city just kept locking us down even before this unrest and for many days afterwards until the ACLU sued the city of Los Angeles, combined with the treatment of peaceful protesters, seemed to me that the focus of the police and of the city was on suppressing our First Amendment rights. And this was really disappointing for me to see that happen in the city. And I hope that you will pay attention to this issue of what was known when and why curfews were used so freely by the city. And again, I just want to thank you so much for doing this. I think that I feel personally betrayed by the behavior of the police, and just very, very sad for what I saw happen on the 30th and the 31st. Thank you.
Alma, just to follow up on what some of what you said, do I hear correctly that you believe that the information that was provided publicly caused you to have a trust issue with the accuracy of the information being put out by the city or the police department?
I would say it seemed inconsistent to me that on the one hand we were ordered into curfew before any civil unrest, and then in subsequent days the city and the police claimed, or appeared to claim to me, that there was they had no idea that there was going to be unrest, and so that's why they were caught flat-footed on the 31st during the looting. So there's an inconsistency there that damages my trust. Also, the way that the protesters were treated, they seemed to me like peaceful protesters. It was just an overreaction by the police. And I feel that tear gas is banned. If tear gas is banned in war, why on earth is our police force using it on protesters?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Homa. Seems like Em has communicated that her microphone is now working. I'm going to try one more time, Em. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So I had commented before about sort of the framing of the issues as the events leading up to, on, and following May 31st, 2020. And that seems to me to be sort of a milquetoast framing of the issues. And as I'm sure you know, all of you at OIR know that issues that are framed in certain ways control outcomes. And the way that the issue is being framed doesn't acknowledge what those events are. And I would really like, and I recognize that the city manager, the city council, framed the issues as they did, or the events as they did, for rhetorical reasons. I would really like for the issues to be reframed more properly so as to define or describe what the events of leading up to, during, and following May 31st are. That's the first thing. I don't want to take too much time. I want to be respectful of the time of others. I would love to hear, and thank you for in the interaction with one of the prior speakers, or a couple of the prior speakers, there being actual questions asked and feedback, because I think that the residents and business owners of Santa Monica generally feel and believe that the city has listening, and I put in quote, listening sessions, and doesn't really ask questions and doesn't really ask for feedback. And so I think that what has just been demonstrated is a really positive step. And I applaud that and encourage that. I also want to know whether percipient witnesses, such as some of those who have already spoken, will be interviewed, whether they will be interviewed under oath, so that there is a record and testimony from people. And not just from the city. So that's a question. I also would like to know whether we're going to get the cooperation of witnesses and actors and non-actors, mismal and nonfeasance, with regard to city employees and city council members. There was a lot of, we know that the chief of police was out of town beforehand. We know that the chief of police is no longer working for the city. and we need to have cooperation from everyone, whether under subpoena or otherwise. I'm interested in knowing, and perhaps someone can answer, whether there has been a demand for preservation of records as recognized by the evidence code, so that no records are destroyed or no records have been destroyed. And I would finally like to know whether at some point, I would like to ask that at some point there be a recommendation that there be an Inspector General's office established in the city of Santa Monica. While I recognize that OIR group is very important to the process here, I think it would be a really good thing to consider whether we should have an Inspector General's office in the city on at least some period of time, whatever that period of time might be, a few years, until we feel that the city is responding to and addressing the concerns of the citizens, the residents, the business owners, and so on and so forth. And then I guess, I'm sorry if I said that was my final point or question. I have one more final point or question. And that is that, and the question is whether this is, I know that originally the city or the police department was going to prepare a report, and an independent review group was going to review the report. But I'd like to know whether, this is a fully independent investigation from go, with full power to subpoena and full power to get the answers, to subpoena, to depose, to get production of documents and so forth. And those are my, what were those, 8 points or questions? But thank you so much for your time and also for your patience with my microphone problems. And thank you.
Thank you. You've raised a number of questions. I thought I took notes with regard to all of them. I thought your question about the framing of the issues and whether or not they have been correctly framed is well taken. And if you have an alternative construct that you would like to communicate to us offline, that would be terrific. I think I got a sense for where you were going with that, but more detail might be helpful to us. With regard to our work, we are going to provide a detailed after action of what transpired on May 31st. To the degree that events leading up to May 31st are relevant to that inquiry or inform that inquiry, we'll back the clock up as well as any events that occurred after. Certainly, to the degree to which the city police department communicated what was going on, what was learned, what was happened, the next day, those are all going to be relevant to our inquiry. We've done this work for 20 years, and we have had few challenges with regard to accessing information as part of our project. If we do have challenges with regard to accessing information, that'll be one of the first things we'll write about, is if we run into barriers or challenges there. We don't expect that. We don't expect that we will need to use judicial process like depositions and subpoenas in order to get the information we need to provide the city with a full-fledged accounting of what occurred. Does that mean that all of the information is still existing? No, some of it's ephemeral, some of it goes away, witnesses' memories fade. But in these days and age, there is so much documentation through cell phone videos, through media videos, and through police cameras, surveillance cameras, that we do have a wealth of material from which to adjudge the actions of the important time period. So we are confident. There's a lot to unpack here for sure, but we're confident we'll have sufficient information upon which we can then move to our next phase, which is to provide recommendations. Your question about Inspector General and oversight, I understand that the city is having conversations in that regard, apart from our project, which has a rather detailed focus. But certainly we are aware of the interest in having, among some, of having a more permanent fixture to do the kind of work that we do, which is to conduct a review independent of the city, independent of the police department, in order to provide an objective account of what occurred and ways to prevent it, anything that was poorly done from happening in the future. I don't know that I got all your questions, but I hope I answered enough of them for the time being, but be happy to have offline conversations with you in the future. Thank you.
You did. The only follow-up question I guess I would have is that, if there's not going to be any sort of such things as depositions or so forth under judicial process or the evidence code, then will testimony be affirmed or sworn to under penalty of perjury?
Yeah, we will figure out certainly best ways to do that. You should know that, for example, a police report, it already has penalties if it's false, right? So there already are some judicial processes and laws and policies baked into the process already. But we will work out a way to ensure that the information we receive is reliable to the degree we can. Thank you, Em.
Thanks.
All right, we have up next Nancy Coleman. Following her is Margarita Quinones Perez, followed by Michael R. So Nancy, if you are available, please unmute your audio and share with us this evening.
Yes, I'm Nancy Coleman. I have lived in Santa Monica for the last 10 years, although I was here for all of my schooling, that is elementary, junior high, and high school before I left to go away to college and then to move to Washington, D.C. One of the things that I think is really important here is, and I appreciate the fact that that we are having this conversation and that folks from OIR are willing to have a dialogue with residents. We as residents do not feel as though our elected officials who give us 1 or 2 minutes to speak after hanging on a phone call for 3 or 4 hours to give that 2-minute speech have anything to do with the way in which Santa Monica operates. So I ask several things of you. First of all, I ask that you continue to be transparent in what you do. 2, in that transparency, you let us know in some way or fashion what the city asked you to do, and as Em put it very succinctly, there are things that they may not have asked you to do, because during the period of May 30th through the first week of June, we got blabber, the residents. We got no specific statements. We got no analysis. We were told a week after the events of the 31st that we would have first, the police would go over what they did and have a report ready within 60 days for the city council. And at that point, they would look for an outside group to do further analysis. We should have had you guys on June 1st, not as we have in October, November. So, I mean, it is to be able to have that discussion, to ferret out and to listen to people who have experience on that day and with the city government and the city administration about how things flow and information that flows. I hope that as you draft your report, it will not simply go to George and Lane and the city council, but that it will come to the residents. Because unless the residents are able to see the drafts, we will not know what was asked or taken out or conclusions that you may have made before it is vetted by, quote, our officials. And we need to have that. We need to have accountability and transparency to the residents of Santa Monica and to some degree to the business owners, especially those who suffered on the 31st. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman, for that, Nancy. We appreciate that. Two things just in brief response so that we can have others participate, but we look for a dialogue. And you should also know that we are going to be reporting every other week on a public website, on your city's website, about the progress of this review. So you will know along the way what we're doing, who we're talking to, not names of people, but just sort of the work we're doing and the progress of our assignment. The other thing you should know is that you raised a good point about the end game. And the end game, we are not going, we have been in this business too long. We have too much credibility to allow what report we have to be edited and observations and findings to be removed. And that's not going to happen. We may present for purposes of ensuring that we are factually accurate, but our findings are going to be our findings. And we hope and look forward to the conversation at the end game with the Santa Monica public, in addition to your elected representatives.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. Margarita, if you are available, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
It's Margaret.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
That's okay. That's okay. And the family sometimes does call me Margarita, so that's okay. First of all, I'd like to give you from my perspective of where I'm coming from. For full disclosure, I've been a resident of Santa Monica for 45 years, raised 2 children here. I'm a current elected official. And where the perspective that I'm coming from, I have a sister-in-law that lost a business during May 31st, lost it completely and will not be able to come back. She was on Broadway and Lincoln, cannot afford to come back. And then also, my family 2 members of my family were killed at Santa Monica College in 2013. So I have a different perspective about our Santa Monica PD, to be blunt, and people will know me to be blunt. I hold the former chief of police fully responsible for everything that was happening and not happening. It was her responsibility. And I feel totally protected that Chief Seabrook is back here. Had she been here, I don't think things would have gone the way they did. For people who did experience all the negative experiences on May 31st, I understand that, but I also, my family got to experience what it was to have law enforcement and our fire department within minutes to try and save my family, which they couldn't be. And we had to wait a while to really find out how they were killed and what happened. Those types of crises, they don't come out right away. There's thorough investigations that have to be done. So I understand the unsatisfaction of not getting things timely, but I'd rather that they give stuff to me, they give my family accurate stuff than inaccurate stuff. And so I have a great deal of respect for our PD, for the college PD and Santa Monica PD. Had they not been there, there could have been hundreds of people killed. But because they were there and were able to get on top of the situation, we lost the 3 people on campus and the other 2 in the Pico neighborhood. So I would like to see the elected officials of the city council, the new ones that are coming up, you need to really look at who's going to be hired as your chief of police. I wish we could duplicate Chief Seabrook, but you got to look for somebody really, really good. And my husband was on the committee that select the last chief of police. And sometimes you have to go with the group consensus and not your individual consensus. So I really hope they put work into that and hear what all the community complaints are so that it doesn't happen again. I was really shocked that it did happen because I have never viewed our Santa Monica PD like that. And I have the ultimate respect and love for them, but I also wasn't there experiencing what the people on May 31st happened. So that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you for sharing that, Margaret. We really appreciate your willingness to speak up and share your perspective.
Thank you for sharing that very personal part of your experience, Margaret. And again, I echo what others have said in the event chat. Very sorry for the loss of your family. I have Michael R. up next. If you would please unmute your audio and share with us this evening. Michael R.
Yes, I wanted to understand in a little bit more detail how your organization is resourced from a funding standpoint to complete the work. The interim city manager and chief of police, as people have talked about previously, initially committed to provide an after-action report within 60 days. The shooting that was alluded to occurred back in 2013, July 2013, I believe, and it took 9 months for the after-action report to be published. The events of March 31st, I would argue or believe to be much more complex in terms of the number of events, number of parties involved, than the after-action report from the shooting in 2013. The city has allocated, as I understand it, $75,000 to complete this work. How does this amount, is this amount really sufficient to do the work? If it takes it's 9 months to do an after-action report in 2013, and here we're going to do an after-action report and also do a review and assessment, critiquing the shortcomings, the strengths and weaknesses of what occurred and how the response was formulated. So is your organization going to be able to execute with what I see as being a very modest budget? $75,000 doesn't seem like a lot. I have worked in IT for many years, and I know what consultants cost, and you don't get much mileage out of $75,000. You get maybe 1,000 hours of work. So I'd like to understand and hear what the response is to that. Is the funding sufficient to actually execute this work and do a quality and thorough job? And I have a follow-on question too after that.
Sure, Michael. The budgeting, obviously, we have been doing this work for 20 years, and we have reviewed officer-involved shootings. We've unfortunately, as a group, reviewed 500 officer-involved shootings over the course of the 20 years we've been in business, which is sad that we have had that much tragedy to look at. So our budgeting doesn't come out of thin air. We believe that the work that we have been asked to do over the time that we've been asked to do it can be accomplished under this budget. But we'll ask you that question about whether or not there is a thorough job when you have a chance to see our report and see whether or not it crosses all the T's and dots all the I's.
Okay, I would also make the observation that our report that I went down and observed the protests before the tear gas and rubber bullets were fired. And I came back downtown a second time around 3 p.m., which was also before the confrontation with the protesters. And I observed along Colorado maybe 12 to 18 LA County Sheriff vehicles and personnel standing around waiting to be deployed. They were not doing anything. And I have to really understand, it's hard to understand how resources were available, though the National Guard was not available. But here we had LA County sheriffs, the sheriff himself, and they stood by and did nothing. They were not deployed. I guess the chief of police would be the person who was responsible to tactically deploy them, but no action was taken with these resources. Hard to understand.
You're not the first person who has raised that issue with us, but I appreciate you raising it as well as an eyewitness to the event. It is something that we will be examining, and that is, again, this event did have a level of complexity in which there were other requests for assistance from other agencies, and what they did and how they deployed is something that we will definitely cover. But thank you for providing corroboration of what we have already heard, Mike.
And I also just, in summary, would confirm the previous statement that the protesters I observed, both up by Montana and the ones down at the intersection of Colorado on Ocean, nonviolent. I didn't see any aggressive activity. I saw them sitting in the street for a long time, sit-down strikes, so to speak. Didn't see any aggressive activities or behaviors on their part. I was very concerned about the very militarized response by the police force with an armored vehicle, people in riot gear with shields, SWAT team members, people heavily armed. You know, when you deploy with that kind of aggressive military presentation, it really encourages or invites a violent response when things go south. So I'm very concerned about the way it was deployed by the police. That's all I have for now.
Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you for those eyewitness accounts. Very much appreciate hearing what occurred there on the ground as well. I will acknowledge Janet McLaughlin as our next speaker, and up next will be Audrey Linus and Waverly Frazier. So Janet, if you are available, please go ahead, unmute your audio and share with us this evening.
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you, Janet.
So this is probably the most well-covered looting in the history of mankind. I watched the looting for 8 hours straight on 6 different TV channels, in addition to dozens, if not hundreds, of people posting real-time videos on Twitter and Facebook. So while we have a lot of pictures and videos that could assist you, I think I've just never seen more of a plethora of information than in this case. In fact, that's how we learned the riots were going to happen, was on social media, or the looting, I should say. We contacted SMPD because we saw several posts on social media outlining the plans for Santa Monica, what they were going to do. And they responded to us and said they were monitoring social media and they did know about it. So it was a little surprising then to hear after the fact that they said they didn't know about it, when in fact the conversations we had prior, they did know about it, and they did know what happened in Beverly Hills and on Melrose, and it was quite a similar scenario. So I also am really disheartened by the fact that no city officials ever reached out to any of the business owners, many of whose livelihood is completely destroyed. They don't have insurance that will cover civil unrest. And I personally asked them to do that, you know, even just as a gesture of just basic human decency to, you know, talk to them, and that never happened. I also took issue with the fact of the mayor continuously saying, oh, there were no serious injuries, when in fact there were, and we have plenty of pictures and videos of those kinds of things if you need them. However, they're all very public on YouTube and other channels of people being seriously beaten to the point of having to be hospitalized. So, if you've driven around Santa Monica, you see that the vacancy rate is I hear varying estimates. I hear 67% in the Promenade, 40% on Main Street. I'm not sure what's true, but I do know that a lot of them are not coming back, and there are some that are open but have plywood up because they're still terrified. They're still having anxiety and PTSD. They don't know from day to day whether they're going to be robbed again. They don't have any, when you go through something like that for 8 hours and you're sitting there watching it unfold on live TV, I mean, and it's almost like you think you're in some futuristic dystopian society that you're actually watching this and nothing is happening. And the reporters are commenting over and over, and the anchors, that never in their career have they seen anything like this, that just continuously one store after another, getting the ATMs out of the banks and cheering and putting them on the sidewalk. I mean, that took a long time, but they had all the time in the world. They had hours and hours to do it. And then other bad guys from other areas are watching it on TV, and they jump in the car and they drive to Santa Monica. Some of them came by train to participate in the fun, and then they started riding until the police said there was thousands. I don't know how many, but there was a lot. I just feel, you'll find your own conclusions, but I do wish to, on behalf of the residents, there are many of us who are suffering very deeply still and have a lot of PTSD and have lost our faith in the city and lost our feelings of security. We feel violated. And I wish that it will never happen again. And I wish that we could have some kind of assurance, at least that they will try to keep us safe and not let it happen again, and try, to differentiate between people who were in fact lawfully, peacefully protesting an injustice and people who were just, there just to destroy and burn and steal and hurt people. So please let me know if there's any other information we can provide to you, if you're missing any links, because like I said, we have so much in terms of videos and pictures, but I'm sure it's easy for you to access as well. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate you reaching out to the community like this.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you for sharing, your personal feelings about that, but also certainly the wealth of information that you have. We know that there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot for us to get through and to sort of unpack and put together about, the events of that day, but also, as you said at the beginning of your comments, who knew what when and what people should have known and all of that. And be assured that all of that is going to be part of our review, and we really appreciate you the offer of materials and certainly drawing our attention to all of that. So thank you.
All right, up next. Yeah, we have Audrey Linus or Linus, sorry for the mispronunciation. After Audrey is Waverly Frazier, and then Lance Mcleod. Audrey.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Thank you, Audrey. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, you did pronounce the name correctly. Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity for truth-telling. I'm a 30-year resident of Santa Monica. And on May 31st, I attended the demonstration at the corner of Ocean and Montana. I was there from about 12:20 until about 1:30. It was a peaceful demonstration. People were wearing masks. It was a friendly and non-threatening crowd. There were families there. The police appeared to be directing traffic. I observed no violent incidents by the participants. At the time that I decided to leave, I walked over to Montana a little bit east of Ocean and observed the police for a while to ensure that they weren't misbehaving. At that time, they appeared courteous and non-officious. Some seemed apprehensive to me, which was surprising given the nature of the crowd. I was going to share some information about a friend, but I'm very glad to hear that she'll be providing her observations after me. So I had a problem with the aftermath of the incident. The Chief Renaud, misrepresented what had happened at Ocean in Montana by stating during a Santa Monica Daily Press interview that participants threw rocks and bottles. The interim city manager gave the law enforcement agency an A for their efforts, which I think was not a correct grade. At the June 5th demonstration at City Hall, the mayor was red-faced and yelling. I did not understand why he was so angry that people were gathering to demonstrate about their feelings about what had happened. During that June 5th demonstration, the chief saw a performative take-a-knee moment, which was ridiculous. At that location and elsewhere, I think it was probably on 2nd Street, there were tanks and people dressed in military garb, which felt threatening. The after-action report, as others have commented, was promised for August, and then the community was told that that was an unreasonable time within which to fulfill that timeline, or to fulfill that task. And so I don't understand why we were promised August. I'm involved in a grassroots organization called the Santa Monica Coalition for Police Reform. We've sought reconciliation with the city, police for a number of years, and these efforts in part were really disregarded by the former city manager and Chief Renaud. We were given courtesy, but the specific actions that we requested were really discounted. And I feel like we're only getting traction now because of May 31st and efforts for risk management. I further wonder whether this particular format is all that useful. I noticed that at the time of the poll, only 9% of the presenters were actually at the demonstrations. So will those who were harmed feel safe to share their experiences in this public and recorded session? And I'm wondering what kind of outreach was performed so that the folks that were participating heard about this and felt comfortable participating. So thank you for your time.
Julie or Mike, did you want to comment about the kind of outreach that was done regarding this event?
Well, thank you for your comments. It was very helpful to hear from you. We certainly are interested in hearing from a spectrum of people, not necessarily limited to those who were there. Certainly those who have an eyewitness account can provide that account, and that will be helpful. But others who did not end up on the protest path, if they have an opinion about how their city has been impacted, we're certainly interested in hearing that as well. With regard to the outreach, we are not Santa Monicans. I have a wife that used to live in Santa Monica, so we did rely in part with regard to outreach on the city's social media platform and experience in order to help us advertise this event. But if others have better ways or more effective ways in which we might be able to communicate with those who may feel apprehensive about participating, or alternatively not interested in participating in as public a forum as this and wanted to talk to us offline without recording, we're interested in receiving information any way we can. This is just one way of doing that. We are unfortunately living in a pandemic. Otherwise, we would have suggested this be a real town hall where we could actually see people in the flesh. That's not possible these days, and so we're doing the best we can under the circumstances. But because of those challenges, any way we can receive information, we are more than interested in doing so. But thank you very much for your participation.
And now we'll hear from Waverly Frazier. followed by Lance Mcleod and Dolores Sloane, please. And thank you all who are commenting in the event chat. I want you to be assured that I am not only taking notes about the things that are occurring in the event chat, but we will also receive a copy of that event chat after the broadcast is complete, and we will certainly be sure to note each of the comments that are being made, in particular as folks are sharing some eyewitness accounts and information that is relevant to our review, so thank you. Waverly Frazier, if you're available, go ahead, unmute yourself. Let's hear from you next. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Waverly.
Okay. So my name's Waverly Nebedum. My mom's last name is Frazier. My last name's Nebedum. I was at the protest on May 31st. I went with my mom and her friend in the morning, and then my mom had left because she was tired. It was a long walk, and then I had gathered with these groups that I had worked with before, and we started protesting on the north side. So I had gathered everyone to get on their knee because I told them the police have tear gas, the police have not rubber cuffs, but cuffs. So if we get any type of rowdiness or any type of, out of pocket belligerent, they will arrest us. So I told everyone, get on your knee, be as quiet as possible, and just put your fist up. So then they had called me over along with another man named Sultan, and they said, you got this side to be peaceful. Is there any way that we can get you to go to the Oversight, the other side, the south side, and get them to be quiet? We were up by Wilshire Boulevard on that side. So we walked over to the other side, and we said, yeah, of course, we'll get them. The other side had been throwing bottles, throwing bricks, a whole bunch of things at the police officers. So we really wanted to calm that down because we didn't want both sides to get in trouble. So we walked over there, and the minute me and him took probably about 5 steps, the police started shooting off tear gas. So then I turned around, I ran back to them, I was like, what are you doing? Like, you just told us to walk over there and be calm, and you're shooting off stuff when you just told us to calm them down. So then I started to walk back, and I hear an officer yell my name. And I've been in this city since I was 10. I've been active in my community since that age. Everyone in the city practically knows my name or knows my face because of the way that I speak out at certain events and certain gatherings, certain community gatherings. And so I saw an officer that I was raised with, and he called my name. We caught up a little bit, and his sergeant came up to us and said, what are you doing? Tell her to walk back over there. She doesn't need to be talking to you. And I looked at him, and I was like, no, he called me over here. We're catching up. You don't need to talk to me that way. And he was like, named the officer and said, tell her now she has to walk back over there. The officer that I was talking to, he put his head down and said, sorry, Waverly, you got to go back over there. So I looked at him like, okay, really? So then I walked away, and I took about 5 steps, and they shot me in my ankle. They shot me in my ankle with a rubber bullet. I had to limp the whole way there, and people had to help me walk to the side. And I sat down, my ankle was swollen. It was huge. And then they started getting aggressive. The police started getting aggressive. So the people, once they saw that, me, the mild, meek-mannered one, had just gotten shot for doing absolutely nothing, nothing could calm them down at that point. They were shooting off rubber bullets when we weren't even 3 feet near them. So my whole opinion about it is, I've lived in the city a very long time, and that whole event just basically reaffirmed what I feel about this community and what I feel they treat people who live here that are of any type of descent. In this city, the majority is treated better than the minorities, even though the minorities are the majority. What I said was the minorities are treated badly, but the majority, the people that have the most population-wise here, are treated better, even though there's more people of color in this city. And that shouldn't be okay. You need to understand where you've come from. You need to understand who you are, and you need to understand respecting people of all backgrounds, all religious types, all everything. And if you can't accept people for who they are and what they bring to the table, you shouldn't be in office. You shouldn't be running for any type of position in the city, and you shouldn't be helping anyone in the city. Everyone deserves a fair shot, and everyone deserves to be treated with fairness, kind and respect. So on that day, it really taught me a lot about the city and how I have to act and how I have to treat people, because of people, it's happened multiple times. I went out to Hollywood and I was pushed in by police. So in Santa Monica, where I'm living and where I should feel safe the most, I shouldn't be treated badly, especially when I was raised here, and especially with the type of relationships that I have with, like she said, Chief Seabrooks, with a lot of officers in this area, in the area that I live, and not only the area I've lived, because I've lived all over Santa Monica, but I can tell you that I know probably about 70 to 75% of the officers on the Santa Monica Police Department by first name. So do I know who shot me? No. But if you showed me who did, I'd probably know who it was. So the simple fact of the matter is, all of the city people, all the people that are on board, and all the people that make changes and make rules in this city need to have a mindset that agrees with minorities. That needs to have a mindset that is willing to cope with the damages that they have done and look forward and move forward to reaffirming the goals that they've set for themselves and the goals that they communicated to the community.
Thank you, Waverly, for those comments. If you wouldn't mind, because I have your last name as your mom's, if you're comfortable doing so, would you please type your name into the event chat so that I can make sure that we acknowledge that properly? Up next to speak is Lance Mcleod, and Lance will be followed by Dolores Sloane. Lance, if you're on, please unmute yourself and share with us. And thank you, Waverly.
Yes. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, Lance, thank you.
First of all, I appreciate what you guys are doing. I want to keep it brief. First of all, basically I'm about 4th Street and Bay, which is about 2 blocks away. I didn't participate in the protest because I was worried about exposing myself to COVID. I did observe, and I don't know if this is important, prior to and during and post a car, which is I later found out is a DHS federal protection officer in his car, who was parked in the street prior, who moved around a little bit during, and subsequently I lost track of him after. So if that's an avenue for gaining information about the event, I hope that could be a resource for you guys. Outside of my apartment window, we can see 4th Street, which became sort of an avenue of egress from situation. So I saw protesters leaving that way. I didn't see any violence from the protesters. They seemed to be leaving in an orderly fashion. There was 0 police presence. I observed it probably about 3 or 4 hours. There was an incident which I was able to capture on my cell phone. Just 3 young guys who were right outside my window, and they had a pair of brand new shoes. They had some duffel bags, and they were talking about either regrouping to go back in, or whether they were afraid and didn't want to get the courage up and where they should split. It was very scary. We watched it on the news, there's, as everyone has said. So my main concern is, where were the police? It seemed that they were absent. I saw, to my shock and horror, so many businesses, many family businesses, a music store, just being gutted, just being looted. You can see all that on the media. You can see these things were happening. So it's really important to understand what I consider the failure or mismanagement, or perhaps just lack of resources, wherewithal, or knowledge by our local police and officials as to why it seemed and appeared to be a very inadequate response. And that's about it. I have the video stuff, so that's my comments. I generally agree with most people and their comments. And thank you.
Thank you, Lance, for sharing your perspective. You said you still have the video. Have you shared that video that you took outside your window? Have you shared that with the police, or are you? Is this the first time you've talked about it?
I have not shared it. This is the first time I talked about it. Basically, it'll show a lane, a bunch of people. Then I have just three. To me, they look like teenagers. I'm like 58. So it just shows them talking and having shoes. And I think they were there for the fun. That's all I can say. But I can send it to you.
Okay, yeah, if you don't mind sending us an email, and that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next speaker is Dolores Sloane. Dolores, if you're available, go ahead and turn your audio on and go ahead and share with us this evening.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can, Dolores. Thank you.
All right. My name is Dolores Sloane. In my present life, I'm a commissioner on the Landmarks Commission, and I love Santa Monica. I take my work here very seriously. I'm also active in citizen and neighborhood affairs, and I've worked with the police department as a resident of the Pico neighborhood near Lincoln. I worked very actively with the neighborhood resource officers to try to do something about the criminal activity and the mental health disordered people and alcoholism that was very evident on Pico and Lincoln. And so I really have folks in the police department I feel very affectionate toward, and towards our present acting police chief, who I got to know and really appreciate. So, I come originally from New York, where police are not regarded that way. At least they weren't when I was growing up, and lived there until I was 29. The police were not your friends. I've been treated very disrespectfully by them. And so I thought I was in heaven, where police officers are so fine that they can actually become people you actually feel affectionate about. So this whole thing, I think we have to be very careful in how we look at the police. It's not just one megalith. It's incidents that happened and why they happened. So the reason I'm speaking, though, is because I just want to document what I saw, because it shows how how diverse within the city this activity happened. I was about 100 miles away from Santa Monica, and on May 31st, and I got a text from my daughter in New York City, and she said, "Mom, they are they have broken into CVS and they're looting it, and there's rioting and looting in Santa Monica." That's how I learned of it, from someone in New York. So you should have no trouble getting videos and evidence, at least that way. And so we thought we'd better go back because we don't know really what's happening, how diverse this is, whether our own home is in danger or whatever. So we went back, and it would take us about an hour and a half to get there. My partner estimates it was about 6 o'clock when we decided to drive past CVS, which is what my daughter said was being looted. And it was a very active scene. We actually stopped our car against the sidewalk and sat there as if we were in a theater watching a play unfold. The immense driveway was empty of cars in front of CVS. All that was there were people, men, I didn't see any women, males, in black, in groups or singly, and some of them were sitting together and they were opening bags, like garbage bags, and taking out what they had looted, and then decided who gets what and who gets what. And we just watched this in disbelief. The doors of CVS were wide open, and there was no sign of any employee or anyone having to do. It was only that this immense site had been taken over, and I would say there were at least 35 looters in the place where the cars were parked. And so we decided that we should call the police. And then we said, well, let's get out of here because some of them may realize that we're watching and we might be attacked. So we took off. We were half block away and we saw 3 men in black walking on the sidewalk towards CVS, and one of them was carrying a baseball bat. So my partner called the police. I happened to have the non-emergency number. So we called that number and reported what we saw. And we reported especially the 3 men who looked like they were taking off to make mischief. And the person said, "We'll send someone right over." And I just want you to note that in all this time, and as late as it was in the afternoon, it was 6 or 6:30, there was no evidence of any law enforcement. And it is as if it had been taken over completely by whomever they were. The looters appeared to be mostly young, some even teenagers, but then there were others there too. And I just want to say that it was so out of character, this whole thing, with what we're hearing about the police. With my direct experience with them is so different, given I had completely contrary experience growing up in New York. So whatever, I'm very glad that we're doing this, and I'm really pleased that we're using an outside organization so that you folks don't really have a skin in the game. And I know how, as a political scientist, I know how government works, and I'm really pleased that you're doing this, and I appreciate your respect and the way you have been speaking with us. And if there's any way I can support you and your work, please call on me. Thank you.
We appreciate that, Dolores. We thank you for your taking the time to be here tonight and speaking, and we certainly are happy to hear your offer of future support, and thank you for your confidence in our ability to get this job done.
Julie, I believe there was a request from some of the folks who are watching the broadcast as attendees or on the live broadcast session to see the results of the polls. And if you have those available, it would be terrific to do a quick share of those so that the folks who are not able to join us today have the opportunity to hear the poll results.
There you go. I hope that they are playing.
They are. I do see that screen. Okay.
So here we go. The poll results from way back at the beginning of this. 60% residents. And to the next ones. I would say that this is this was accurate in terms of what we've been hearing tonight, the 65% on that poor rating. And again, sort of consistent with the comments that we've gotten. Thank you, Corey, for pulling those together for us.
We have a final speaker who has requested to speak, and who has identified him or herself as guest. Guest, if you are available, we would love to have your name if you are comfortable doing so. Go ahead and unmute yourself and share your experiences with us, please.
Yeah, I think you are referring to me.
I believe you're the only guest we have so far.
I'd rather not give my name. I don't like
No
putting
problem.
my likeness out on the internet. I plan on possibly taking your live stream that you have up now, clipping it and putting it on my YouTube channel. So I follow you guys on Twitter. I'll let you know who my Twitter name is. I'm the unuseful idiot. So my channel is named that way as well. I'm not sure if you know what a useful idiot is, but I'm an unuseful one. So I'll start. Let me introduce you. Yeah. I hope I live up to my moniker. So I have been a resident of Santa Monica for 25 years. Graduated Santa Monica High School in the class of 2008. I don't really know where to begin, but I am extremely upset about what happened on May 31st still. You know, it's been a couple of months, but I'm still upset about it. I'm shocked and appalled. So I suppose I would like to begin with what the American philosophy of government is or is supposed to be. So generally speaking, the purpose of the American government, as the founders proposed, is to protect the rights of its people and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And in order to see this end to come true, we have this construct known as the social contract, wherein you surrender some of your liberty, some of your property, in this case, money, usually. You pay the government taxes so that they can fund certain essential services to protect your rights, which would be, in this case, your property. So I, over the course of, like many other speakers, over the course of many hours, saw on television, on certain live streams, people vandals, arsonists, etc., completely destroy a number of different businesses that when I was much younger, I would, at 3rd Street Promenade, I would patronize. And so I'm left wondering, while all of this is happening, why, these businesses are taxed by the city so that in situations such as what occurred on May 31st, they will have the city come in and protect their property from being destroyed. So I don't know why are these businesses paying their taxes in the first place. The city completely dropped the ball on this, and it's pretty gross, if I say so myself. That being said, I would like to, I really, some speakers came and had a speech that they clearly had rehearsed and written out before. I am not that kind of person. So I just wrote a couple of bullet points here and wanted to talk and respond to a couple of the things that other people have said and things I've been hearing, on the media, on the news for many months. So one of the things I would also like to talk about, I'd like to try and dispel the myth of the peaceful protester. There is no such thing as a peaceful protester. It's a completely oxymoronic phrase. The whole point of a protest is to disrupt the peace, disrupt the normal schedule of what happens in a particular place on a day-to-day basis, and make other people aware of something that has happened, to raise awareness of a cause or event. For crying out loud, these people were marching through the streets, shouting at the top of their lungs, disturbing the peace with their, noise and their chants. They were shouting at the top of their lungs, no justice, no peace. So whenever I hear anyone describe these people, label them as peaceful protesters, I feel like I'm being gaslit and having someone spit in my face. It's just completely absurd and ridiculous. Furthermore, I would like to note that every single looter, every single vandal, every single arsonist is a quote-unquote peaceful protester until they start looting, vandalizing, and setting fire to businesses. Furthermore, I would like to note we are in the midst, or still are, I imagine, we are in the midst of a pandemic where there is a supposedly highly contagious and dangerous virus that can spread if you do not keep your distance between other people. And so I am quite upset at the fact that I seem to have lost my train of thought. I'm just quite upset at the fact that let's see. All right, peaceful approach. I'm quite upset at the fact that I think I'll end there. I'm just upset. I'm mad to the point of not being able to articulate myself. I think I've made at least a handful of the points I would like to make. I'd like to thank you for listening to me. Oh, I know what I was. let me make a couple more points. I don't understand why you guys are doing this city council meeting now. We had an election earlier this month. It would have been nice to have had this conversation for the residents of Santa Monica who are concerned about this, to have, had a platform to discuss their issues before the election. So perhaps they could figure out, the candidates running could maybe discuss amongst their supporters how they were going to fix the problems that we saw. So I'm kind of upset about that. I'm also upset that it's been months. It would have been nice to have some kind of conversation between the city and its residents sooner. It happened in May. This is November. So that's 4 months or something. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. why anyone in their right minds would, willfully surrender their taxes to a city that does not protect their property and that sides with, lets looters and arsonists run free, that lets peaceful, quote unquote, protesters run free in the midst of a pandemic. I understand people have the right to peacefully assemble at their homes. If you want to get together and have a cup of tea with someone, that's a peaceful assembly. Protest is something different, especially when you step out onto the street and block traffic and do things of that nature. Generally speaking, I do believe you need a permit to do something like that. You need to coordinate with the city so that they can arrange to have police certain parts. You're done. Okay.
We really we appreciate hearing from you, and we are certainly.
You can see why I didn't get into why I call myself the unuseful idiot. Okay, thank you so much.
I appreciate it. We just have a couple more people that want to speak, and we're running short of time. But thank you so much for your comments.
Thank you for hearing me.
Okay. I think Laura was up next. Is that right, Teresa?
That's right. We have Laura, and then if time allows, I would love to loop back to Craig Miller, who has been very patiently waiting if he is still here. So Laura, go ahead and unmute yourself. Then we will hear from Craig Miller. That will be our final speaker this evening to wrap us up. We will then have just some closing commentary rather quickly, and we will make sure that we respect your time to leave the session at 7:30. Laura, go ahead, please.
Hi, thank you. So I'm a lifelong resident. I've lived here for about 49 years. I own property here. I rent here. I work in the city. I love Santa Monica. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I too am very upset about what happened. I know some police officers personally. This isn't against any particular person, but I do have to say that I feel like maybe because they're not residents of the city, they're not invested in the city like we are. I don't know. I feel like maybe we should look for a chief of police who lives in the city. I don't know if that's possible. I know there might be safety concerns, but I don't know how you get more invested in the actual residents or as invested as residents if you're not a resident. I also feel like self-preservation maybe took over more than protecting others, which I understand, but I feel like some of what the police did instigated things. So then they had to react and protect themselves. I know that maybe they were worried because one of them was standing near a store while tens if not more people were running in and out, but they had groups of police officers in some places and then single one standing in others. I just feel like things that could have spread out more. I did go and ride my bike around a little bit earlier in the day when it seemed safe and I observed what I thought was a peaceful protest. I knew to go home. I didn't have any intel. I'm not on social media, but I knew that I wanted to be inside when it got dark because I had a feeling because I live here and I just knew the tone and I knew our neighboring cities were having problems at night. I don't understand why our police department didn't even have that feeling. Let's say they really didn't have any intel. Is that not something that you would maybe expect? Because I did. Another thing is I heard the police chief say that she felt they were protecting lives as opposed to property, that was their first priority. But the only reason there weren't more lives lost or injuries is because the people that came into our city to commit crimes chose not to injure people. And they injured a few, but they chose to attack stores and property. Had they chosen, is that right? I don't know. Had they chose to attack us, the citizens, we would have been in a lot of trouble. It was clear that there was no protection. So sorry if I'm not really articulate right now. I'm kind of nervous, but I'm just really upset about this whole thing. It makes me very uneasy. I do feel like at any time this could just happen again now because I don't know that there's a plan in place. I don't know that things have changed. I don't agree with a lot of what the last person said, but I do agree with some that our officers are some of the highest paid, and we pay them to protect us. And I don't feel like I was protected. So, and not just stuff. I mean, me as a person, I really feel like the criminals came into the city and chose not to go after people. They had an agenda. Had their agenda been to hurt people, we would have all been in a lot of trouble. So that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. That was very very moving, and appreciate and understand speaking in public can make people nervous, particularly if they're emotionally invested, but we appreciate you reaching out in the way that you did. Thank you.
Craig, are you still with us? If you are.
I sure am. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, thank you.
I'm here. You can hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you, and we would like to have just some moments for wrap up at the conclusion here before 7:30, but I did want to loop back to you.
Well, you're very kind, and I also just want to say, OIR, the compassion that you're approaching this with is very evident, and I think and sincerity, and I think it's just hugely appreciated by all of the callers. I want to come back just to Ocean Avenue south of the pier and again state that what I observed was an entirely non-violent crowd. I think it's hugely important that we listen to all of the callers tonight, but particularly the second to last speaker. I think the gentleman makes some hugely important observations and states beliefs that go to the core of this matter. He views protesters as inherently not peaceful, particularly if they're noisy. Now, this is key because I want to encourage the OIR group to listen to the podcast that's been referenced here by others tonight and to listen to the chief's statements in particular, because she makes a point of drawing a distinction between, and I'm quoting close to exactly here, she makes a distinction between quote unquote peaceful demonstrators and a second body, and I quote, angry manifestations of social injustice. So she separates in her mind an angry manifestation of social injustice from a peaceful, or perhaps from an acceptable, or perhaps from a group that warrants being shot at with tear gas.
I won't.
I'm not sure what's going on here other than maybe...
This call out is uncalled for. You're calling me out, Craig. I unmuted myself. Yes, you are.
Sir,
yes, you are.
I'm going to request that we please use
his chance to speak. He's over. I'm not done speaking.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to request that we have respect for one another.
Thank you, Teresa. Let me amplify that. I appreciate it. This has been a very, very helpful dialogue. We really appreciate it. People were very, very insightful and provided unique perspectives. And we really appreciate the opportunity to get to know you over this platform, as artificial as it is. Julie, do you just want to spend a minute talking about next steps in the minute that we have left?
Yeah, sure. This listening session and others that we will do and other feedback that we're getting from people who were impacted by the events of that day and that weekend are a critical step in our process of producing a final comprehensive report. And so we really appreciate your willingness to spend some time with us. We appreciate all of your comments. And we've got, as many of you have noted, there is a lot of information out there, a lot of video. We've already received many documents. We're going through all that. We're listening to people. And we look forward to being able to share a final report with you.
Yeah. Teresa, do you want to close us out? George, do you have any final comments on your behalf? Otherwise, we're respectful of everyone's time, and Look
Just
for
one
us
quick
if
thing.
you feel this this session has been helpful, and you know of others that might want to share. We will have at least one more session. It has not been scheduled yet, but we will certainly give as much advance notice so that people can reserve that time, and we look forward to additional listening sessions. Thank you, everybody. George, sorry to cut you off there.
Well, that's okay. One quick thing. I just want to remind everybody, in terms of outreach to have people participate in the other listening sessions, we will use the same mechanisms, website, social media, but if you do have ideas at getting other people to give us their views, please let us know by sending an email to the email address that's been popping up in the event chat repeatedly. And if people are uncomfortable, if you know people who are uncomfortable with speaking in a public listening session and would prefer to simply send an email comments or provide their contact information to OIR group to be reached out individually, they can also reach out to them using that email address. So with that, again, thank you to everybody for coming, and thank you OIR group for running this. And we will see everybody, or hopefully a new group, at the next listening session.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for your time tonight.